Since the very first mobile devices, we have wanted ways to connect these things to do all kinds of stuff. Mainly, we wanted to connect them to give them power. We wanted to connect them so that we could do data transfers of some type. And third, we'd like to connect our mobile devices to large video output. There's nothing better than using a little tablet to make a PowerPoint presentation. So what I want to talk about in this episode is the happy magic world of the many wired connections that we have with mobile devices. Now, if there's been a place that we've seen evolution in technology, it has been in the many different types of wired connections that we use on mobile devices. If you go back to the old days, this old iPac of mine had this crazy proprietary connection. I actually had to plug it into a docking station, and then that made my link to my computer. This old iPhone that I've got here has a proprietary 30-pin dock connector, and luckily we don't see those too terribly much anymore. So the thing I want to stress right now is that most of the connections that we use on today's mobile devices are very much standardized. So what I want to do is go through these. So the best place to start is I've got some data and power connectors right here, and I've put down a little piece of paper because some of these are black and some are white. I want you to be able to see them. So let's take a look. The three connectors I have here, in no particular order, starting over here with this dark one, that is good old micro USB. Micro USB is de facto standard data and power connector for pretty much all Android devices as well as Windows Mobile. Newer and becoming more popular by the minute is USB-C. USB-C is still USB, but it handles more power, it is faster, and is generally taking over from regular USB quite quickly. Last is Apple's Lightning connector. This is going to be unique to Apple devices, and it transfers power and data, but the only place you're ever going to be seeing those is on Apple devices. All right, so the thing to remember with these types of connectors is, more than anything else, enjoy standardization. There are some subtleties, and later in this episode I'll show you what we're talking about. You know what? While we're talking about it, let's go ahead and talk about video output. I'm on the road a lot giving presentations, and I find it incredibly convenient to be able to put my presentations on a tablet and just output that to whatever projector or big screen or whatever they might have in that particular presentation area. So the idea of having video output on mobile devices, in particular tablets, is a very, very popular idea. Now, if you look at the first few generations, this is the first tablet I ever bought right here, an old Asus. If you look at the first few generations, what they did is they used small versions of good old HDMI. These connectors, known as mini and micro HDMI, were popular for years. I've got them both right here. So this is mini HDMI, and this little guy is micro HDMI. Now, as a matter of fact, if you look on the back, this is really a mini HDMI to micro HDMI adapter. These things worked great for years. In fact, it was very convenient because I would have one cable that would plug into my tablet and then plug into whatever HDMI thingamabob you had, and it would just work, and it was a beautiful thing. Now, the problem is that these types of small HDMI are fading out pretty quick, if not already. If you take a look at a modern tablet, what you're going to notice is that it's going to have a micro USB, pretty much, unless it's Apple, of course. It's going to have a micro USB connector, but the powers that be felt that having a micro USB and some kind of small HDMI connector were just too many connectors. And there was a lot of pressure to combine them. And that's where Mobile High Definition Link, or MHL, comes into play. MHL is a standard for how a device talks video out to another device. It doesn't have super standardized connectors. Now, I'm going to put a qualifier on that because what I want to show you is a MHL connector. Now, if you take a look at that MHL connector, first of all, you can see that it's kind of similar to that micro HDMI, but it gets worse than that. Let me put a good old micro USB in on the picture. And if you take a look at these two in particular, they are physically, in terms of depth and width, the same size. There's a different pin structure, and in many cases, the MHL is interconnectable with micro USB, but the bottom line is that right now in the industry, there's a bit of an issue with this. So you end up doing things like getting wacky adapters like these that I have to plug in or something like that. If you want to use a tablet device and output to a projector or something like that via HDMI, MHL, when everything's right, works beautifully. But given the fact that we have issues with the standard, I would take my tablet, go to the store where you're going to buy that cable that gets whatever is the connector here to HDMI. I would literally make it run in the store with you there. Make them grab some monitor or some TV or something that's got an HDMI input and take whatever cables they're trying to sell you and make that image show up, because there are so many issues right now with this that it can be very, very frustrating. All right, well, the last thing I want to talk about is the also-rans, and in particular, let's take a minute and talk about that little jack on the top of your mobile device. Who hasn't seen somebody walking down the street with earbuds plugged into their mobile device as they merrily walk along or run a 5K or crash into walls? Who knows? But anyway, pretty much every mobile device has a 3.5 millimeter jack. And I'm sure you've seen this type of thing where people plug in their earbuds and listen, but there's actually a little bit more to it than that, and that's what I'd like to cover right now. In particular, I want to show you two jacks that I've got sitting right here. Now, both of these are 3.5 millimeter jacks. Now, this one right here is just a good old set of earbuds, and I want you to look very closely here. You're going to see two little black marks there. What you're looking at is three separate contacts. One contact is a ground, one is it's stereo, so one is left and one is right. So that works out great. But the 3.5 millimeter jacks on pretty much every mobile device can handle also input. So microphones would be the obvious one, but you can also do some other cool stuff with it. Like, look at this guy right here. This is a card reader. And if you look very closely, you'll see that there's four separate contacts. And in that case, what it's doing is as you swipe the card, it's actually interpreted as sound and brought into your system itself. So it's actually pretty cool. I love all the different types of connectors on mobile devices, but I'm going to show you my absolute most important one. I play a little game called Ingress. If you don't know it, check it out. But it is one of these things that tends to burn my battery down pretty fast. So I like to use all these little battery packs. So this particular battery pack, I can charge it up, and as my phone begins to discharge, plug this in and he can restart to charge them on the fly. Okay, you've got a lot of different connectors that you need to know for the A+. Make it easy for yourself and separate them. Number one, think about data connectors. So that's going to be USB more than anything else. Lightning if you're on an Apple. Think about power connectors and make it easy because they're the exact same connectors. And number three, take some time to make sure you understand and can recognize the different types of HDMI.